Hi everyone, this is Mindy and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I am going to show you a trick that you should do first before you ever stamp your image for the first time. I'm also going to be doing some coloring with my OLO alcohol ink markers. For the card project, I am going to be using the Forever Yours stamp set and coordinating die. So I'm starting out by placing this in my Misti tool using some Hammermill cardstock that I will be using to color the image on. Now, because it's a brand new stamp, the first thing you want to do before stamping is condition your stamp. There are many different ways to do this. My favorite and easiest way is just taking some Versamark or some embossing ink, inking that image up, and then wiping it clean with a stamp chamois or tidy towel. Then I'll just take my hand and pat it to pick up any excess water that might be left on there from that cleaning cloth. Now I can come in with my intense black ink from Simon Says Stamp and stamp this down onto the cardstock. So what that Versamark did was it's helping condition our stamp. A lot of times when we receive stamps or from they're made from the manufacturer, there is some leftover residue, maybe even some dust, things like that, that can ruin your image when you stamp it down. So by doing that, it's conditioning your stamp. Like I said, there are many ways. There's erasers and things like that. I just find the easiest way is using my embossing ink to help condition it. I did still stamp the image twice just because I really want to make sure I'm getting all those fine lines. And to do my coloring, I'm using my OLO markers. This is a chart that I got off of Sandy Allnock's website that helps me pick out my colors for the OLO markers. Now, these are an alcohol marker, just like Copic markers. They're just a little bit different in design. For instance, the barrel where the ink is an actual ink cartridge. It is not something where the ink is going to get absorbed into. It is just an ink cartridge, which means that's all you need to replace when you need to refill your markers. You just need to replace the cartridge. The barrels also come apart. So in the middle of the markers, you can kind of twist it off so you can combine two different colors in one marker piece. I actually have mine just left all together as one color because for me right now, that's just the easiest way to do it. And there's also different styles of tips. Right now, I just have the brush markers because they don't have the small nibs available yet, which is something I do hope they come out with because I do want that option of having that smaller tip. But they do have the chisel available. Mine, like I said, are just both of the brush tip markers. And just like in any other alcohol marker, you want to stamp in an ink that is alcohol marker friendly. So for instance, I used Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, but the Gina K Designs Amalgam ink or Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, those are all alcohol marker friendly as well. The other thing that I really love about these markers is that the ends are not going to crystal up. Like you've noticed maybe with some of your red Copic markers, if you have those, the tips get crystallized for whatever reason. I don't know the mechanics behind it, but these are not supposed to do that. And so far, I've had these for quite a while now when they came out, and my tips have been wonderful. I don't use them as often as I probably should, mainly because I'm not as familiar with these as I am the Copic markers. Now, as far as their selection, it is a limited selection as of right now. They're not as big of a collection as Copic markers, but I did find in the Copic selection, I was lacking in some different shades. I felt like I was always grabbing the same thing. And what you can do, for instance, if you kind of started with a smaller collection of Copic markers, you can grab maybe two or three OLO markers to fill in maybe a shade that you don't have yet with the Copic markers. Normally, when I would be doing my coloring with alcohol markers, I would use Nina 80 pound. It's what I used on all my card fronts for ink blending and everything else, die cutting. But I am finding that with these OLO markers, I do prefer them on a smooth cardstock. So this is Hammermill. I've also used them on the Express It cardstock, and I do prefer that more. For some reason, I'm getting a lot of bleeding when I use Nina 80 pound, and with their Hammermill, I am not getting any bleeding outside of the lines. So your cardstock does make a huge difference. There were some areas in the larger petals of my flowers where I went over it quite a few times. I would flip over, look, and I could really see I saturated that cardstock pretty good. And I did not have any bleeding outside of my stamped lines. I've used many alcohol ink markers on my YouTube channel. I've done tri-blend markers, I do Copics. I've briefly done some OLO markers in the past too, just kind of touching on it, getting used to them. really you do whatever you want to do or what you think might be best suitable for your budget or your style. I like them all. I like to invest and play around. I really do love my Copics because I'm familiar with those. I've been playing with those for over 10 years. And the tribal markers is something that I just recently started getting into. I like the convenience. I like how there are three different colors in one actual like marker barrel. So I do like that convenience sometimes, and sometimes there's really different color selections there. Now for the Olos, I like these too. I really don't have a personal preference, I guess I would say at this time. It's kind of what I'm in the mood for. I want to make sure I give all my products some love. If you're trying to figure out what to buy, I would say start out with a small grouping. So, for instance, I have the color combinations listed at the top. If you like that particular color combination, buy those particular markers. Just start out with something small. Do you color a lot of flowers? Do you color a lot of critters? Things like that. Really take a look at what you color. Now, a little trick I wanted to show you here is that if you feel like you lost your highlight area, you can take a white Prismacolored pencil and just real lightly go over those highlight areas, and that's going to help it pop just a little bit more in that specific area. So that's a really good trick to keep in mind if you tend to overcolor sometimes like I do. Another stamping trick that I often forget about is bringing your cardstock back into your Misti. I left my stamp there. I cleaned it off, but I left it in the exact same place, and I'm going to ink up my image using Versafine Clair Nocturne ink. And what this is going to do is really make those black lines come back to the forefront if you like that look. I really do actually like that look. And so this is something that you can do after your coloring is all done. Because sometimes when we're coloring, we kind of maybe lose how dark that black ink was. So by stamping back on top of it, we're really bringing those colors back to the front. And then because a VersaFine does stay wet a little bit longer, I like to just take my Ranger heat tool and go over that until it's nice and dry. For the background for my card, I'm going to use the Simon Says Stamp Dots on Dot stencil. So I have a piece of Hammermill cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, just kind of lightly tacked down to my Tonic magnetic work surface. And then I held the stencil over it using the magnets. I'm going to come in with a blending brush and the Lost Shadow Distress Oxide ink, which is the newest color as of right now in the Distress line. And I thought it would make a really great subtle background, which is kind of always what I had in mind when it came to getting this ink color. And it did, it worked perfectly. Now, as I'm going over this, I am not filling in all of the circles going all the way up to the top. I'm kind of having it fade off a little bit. So it feels a little more scattered and subtle. And I was really happy as I brought my flowers in to take a look at. I'm going to be using the XL Love Greetings stamp set. This is a large stamp set with a lot of really great greetings on here. And I chose this particular greeting about hugs because I'm actually intending on sending this to my mom for Valentine's Day. It's going to arrive a little late, but instead of making it like full on Valentine's Day, I just thought this one about hugs was super cute. And I also love the font, and it was going to fit perfectly above my floral image. So I stamped that down a couple times to make sure everything is filled in really well, even cleaned the stamp off just to restamp it because there's a lot of solid area of that sentiment. Then coming in and just making sure that that sentiment is completely dry because I am going to use the coordinating die to die cut it out. And if it was still wet, it would transfer that black ink to my die cutting plate. So I held that coordinating die in place with the Easy C tape, and I had previously off screen die cut out my image using the coordinating die as well. And I die cut one out of white cardstock so I could layer it together for some stability using my Connect glue that I have in these fine tip bottles. I'm also going to do that with my sentiment. I die cut it out about 2 more times from some plain white cardstock. The Hammermill cardstock isn't super thick, so I like to have that stability of another piece of cardstock behind it. And then I can come in and add some thin foam squares behind the sentiment. And I keep them in these 4 by 6. I think that's about the size. Photo storage boxes. I tell you, that's probably one of my best organization things I have ever done is putting my foam squares in those containers. So then I took some Altenew foam tape and added that to the back of my floral image, and I'm placing that down towards the bottom of my cardstock. For the sentiment, I'm going to add a little bit of that Connect glue to the foam squares because I want to be able to place this down and have a little bit of wiggle room so that it's not stuck straight to my cardstock right away. Adding that liquid glue allows me to kind of shimmy it and make sure that it is perfectly straight. The last thing I'm going to do is come in with some embellishments, and these are some clear dewdrops from Concord and Ninth. I just placed a few around my sentiment, and I'm adding them with my Connect glue and my pick and stick tool. And then I'm filling in the little areas, I think those like where berries would be, using some unicorn stickles just to give it a little bit of sparkle. And that's going to finish off my card project for today. So I hope that tip about conditioning your stamp really helps you when you are starting out or stamping an image for the first time. And then I also hope you kind of took away some information that I had explained over alcohol markers and the OLO markers in particular. All of my supplies are listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. Thanks so much for joining me today, and see you soon.